a prominent newspaper, once convinced an entire city that lions, tigers, and a rhinoceros were rampaging through the streets of New York, killing 49 people, and how that single hoax accidentally gave birth to one of the most recognizable political symbols in American history. On November 9th, 1874, New Yorkers woke up, grabbed their morning copy of the New York Herald, and were greeted with a stack of headlines that read like a nightmare. Awful calamity. The wild animals broken loose from Central Park. Terrible scenes of mutilation. A shocking Sabbath carnival of death. Savage brutes at large. You have to remember that during this time period, the newspaper was the primary source of information for most people. There were no smartphones or even household televisions. If it was printed in the newspaper, everyone was going to read it. The article claimed that the previous Sunday evening, a rhinoceros had smashed through its enclosure at the Central Park Zoo, gored its keeper to death, and set off a chain reaction that freed nearly every dangerous animal in the menagerie. A polar bear, a panther, a Numidian lion, several hyenas, a Bengal tiger, tapirs, anacondas, all of them loose, all of them hungry, and all of them tearing through the streets of Manhattan. According to the Herald, a lion had been spotted inside a church, a rhinoceros had fallen into a sewer, tigers were chasing society ladies through the avenues. The police and the National Guard were heroically battling the beasts, but already 49 people were dead and 200 more were injured. The article even included a fake proclamation, supposedly issued by the authorities, ordering all citizens except members of the National Guard to stay inside their homes until the animals were captured or killed. The all-clear signal, it said, would come in the form of cannon fire from City Hall Park, Tompkins Square, Madison Square, and several other locations across the city. And New Yorkers believed every word of it. Men grabbed their guns and took to the streets, ready to hunt escaped predators through their own neighborhoods. The police mobilized. People barricaded themselves in their homes, listening for cannon fire that would never come. The city was gripped by genuine, widespread panic. And the whole thing was completely made up, buried at the very bottom of the article, well past the fake proclamation, past the gruesome descriptions of maulings and the heroic last stands of police officers, was a single line. It read, "Of course, the entire story given above is a pure fabrication. Not one word of it is true." That was it. That was the Herald's defense. "We told you it was fake. You just didn't read far enough." Now here's the thing. This wasn't some small-time tabloid chasing quick sales. The New York Herald ranked among the most powerful and widely read newspapers on the planet. James Gordon Bennett Sr. had founded it in 1835 with $500 and a cellar, then built it into such a media empire that Abraham Lincoln reportedly read it every single day. The Herald made Bennett one of the wealthiest men in America. By 1874, his son, James Gordon Bennett Jr., had taken over, and Bennett Jr. was not a man who did things halfway. He'd already financed Henry Stanley's legendary expedition into the African interior to find the missing explorer Dr. David Livingstone, a stunt that earned the Herald international acclaim and cemented its reputation as the most daring newspaper in the world. So Bennett decided to follow up finding a lost explorer in Africa with convincing New York that zoo animals were eating people. The man behind the actual writing was Joseph Ignatius Constantine Clark, an Irish-born journalist who had previously served as assistant editor of the Irish Times before crossing the Atlantic to join the Herald. Clark wrote the hoax under the direction of the paper's managing editor, Thomas B. Connery. And Connery actually had a real motivation behind the whole thing. He walked through Central Park regularly and had personally witnessed a leopard nearly escape from its enclosure at the zoo. The safety precautions were genuinely terrible, and Connery wanted to draw public attention to the fact that dangerous animals were being held behind flimsy barriers in the middle of the most densely populated city in America. So he told Clark to write the most terrifying zoo escape story imaginable, complete with realistic details, named locations, and real public figures. The article referenced General Abram Duryea, who was the actual New York City police commissioner at the time, praising his magnificent police tactics in fighting off the animals. Duryea held a real position of authority, which made the whole thing feel that much more credible. The article ran on page 3 of the November 9th edition, and it worked. Maybe a little too well. The backlash was immediate and brutal. 4 days later, on November the 13th, the Daily Graphic published a satirical front cover mocking the Herald. The headline read, "Another awful calamity. The intellectual department of the New York Herald let loose upon the public." Cartoonist Arthur Burdett Frost provided the illustration. Critics accused Bennett of inciting panic. The Herald argued that technically they hadn't done anything wrong, that the disclaimer was right there in the article, and that if you believed the story, that was your own fault for not reading to the end. This defense did not go over well. But here's where this story takes its strangest turn, because the zoo hoax didn't just cause a citywide panic. It accidentally helped create one of the most enduring symbols in American politics. At the same time, Bennett was running fake zoo stories. The Herald was also pushing a separate political narrative, warning that President Ulysses S. Grant might try to run for an unprecedented third term. The paper called it Caesarism, and Democratic politicians seized on that fear heading into the 1874 midterm elections. Enter Thomas Nast, the legendary political cartoonist for Harper's Weekly. Nast looked at two completely separate Herald stories, the Caesarism panic and the zoo escape hoax, and combined them into a single cartoon called The Third Term Panic. In it, a donkey disguised as a lion represents the Herald wearing a lion's skin. The fake threat of Caesarism, frightening all the other animals in a forest meant to represent Central Park. Most of the animals are fleeing, but one stands its ground at the edge of a pit. That animal is an elephant labelled the Republican vote. That was the moment. While a few earlier minor connections between elephants and the Republican Party had existed before, it was Nast's cartoon, directly inspired by the Herald's zoo hoax, that established the elephant as the permanent symbol of the Republican Party. He followed it up with another elephant cartoon on November 21st, and the image stuck for good. So a fake news story about zoo animals escaping in Central Park gave rise to the Republican elephant. History is genuinely strange sometimes. The Herald never fully recovered its credibility. The paper that Lincoln had read every morning, that had sent explorers into uncharted Africa, had damaged its own reputation for the sake of a stunt. It limped along for another 50 years before finally merging with the Tribune in 1924. Right alongside the Great Moon hoax of 1835, where the New York Sun convinced readers that astronomers had discovered civilization on the moon, the Central Park Zoo escape stands as one of the most notorious media hoaxes of the 19th century. But what makes this story feel so relevant today isn't just the hoax itself, it's the Herald's defense. We told you it was fake, you just didn't read to the end. In 1874, newspapers were Americans' primary source of information, and as the industry grew more focused on circulation and revenue, selling papers started competing directly with telling the truth. Some outlets began running falsified stories deliberately, testing the boundaries of what they could get away with. That dynamic never really disappeared. 150 years later, we're still having the exact same conversation about media, trust, and what happens when engagement matters more than accuracy. The only difference now is that the fake stories travel a lot faster than a morning newspaper ever could. Thanks for watching. See you next time.